Carl Jung realized that the most harmful people didn't start with anger or open cruelty. They started with being too sure of themselves. Jung noticed that almost 3 out of 4 of his most dangerous cases had the same hidden sign. At first, it looked like moral certainty, but it was something darker. It wasn't rage or lies. It was them projecting their own hidden darkness onto others and believing it was the truth. The real danger was never in the liar's words, but in the person who believed he saw reality clearly, while in fact, he was only seeing the shadow of himself. Jung watched with unease as one particular patient unfolded this pattern before his eyes. The man spoke with eloquence, carried himself with charm, even wrapped his concern for others in a language that seemed noble. But behind his soft words, Jung heard a strange rhythm. Every accusation the man leveled against others described not strangers, but himself. The cruelty, the selfishness, the deceit he so despised were all familiar. They were his own repressed impulses, dressed in other people's clothing. Within months, the patient left ruin in his wake. Friends turned against each other, families fractured, reputations destroyed. Yet he walked away with the expression of a victim, never once doubting his innocence. It was then Jung understood that shadow projection, when fused with unshakable conviction, is not mere misunderstanding. It is a psychic weapon. The most terrifying part was not that this man lied. It was that his own brain had reshaped reality to protect him from the unbearable sight of his own darkness. Modern neuroscience would later confirm what Jung intuited. In moments of intense projection, the mind activates the same circuits as delusion. The projector does not simply imagine, they inhabit a rewritten reality. Their conviction becomes contagious, bending not only their own perception, but the perception of those around them. What begins as one man's blindness can swell into a collective hallucination. This is why the truly dangerous projector does not destroy alone. They recruit. Like an unseen magnet, they draw others into their storm until an entire group begins to see the scapegoated target through their borrowed eyes. Families turn on sons, workplaces exile the innocent, communities crucify those who never committed the crimes attributed to them. The tragedy is not only in the destruction of the accused, but in the unconscious obedience of the crowd that follows certainty over truth. Ancient wisdom had already whispered of this danger. The Buddha spoke of the soiled mirror. Christianity warned of beams mistaken for specks. But Jung named it more precisely. The shadow creates entire alternate worlds, and those worlds grow more convincing the more fiercely they are defended. If you have ever been accused of intentions you never carried, and the accuser spoke with such absolute assurance that you questioned your own memory, you have felt the grip of projection. And if you have tried to reason with them only to find that every word you spoke became further proof against you, then you know why Jung warned, reason cannot penetrate this kind of certainty. The pattern is predictable. It begins with whispers of doubt, subtle misreadings that seem harmless. Then comes crystallization, accusations repeated with the weight of truth, impervious to evidence. Soon, everything you do becomes interpreted through their lens. Neutral gestures are recast as malicious signs. Then begins the recruitment, conversations laced with concern about your character, stories retold until others too begin to see you as guilty. Finally, possession. The many now carry the one person's distorted image as their own truth, and you find yourself outnumbered by shadows that never belonged to you. But projection was only the first of the dangers Jung mapped. The second he called ego inflation, when a person fuses their fragile identity with forces far larger than themselves. Here, the danger is not unconscious blindness, but conscious righteousness. Unlike the projector who sees their darkness only in others, the inflated one believes they embody archetypes, the savior, the prophet, the enlightened guide. They glow with moral certainty, and people willingly kneel before them, because their confidence feels like wisdom. Yet it is precisely their certainty that makes them dangerous, for the inflated cannot bend. To question them is to question truth itself, and under the mask of holiness, they can inflict wounds far deeper than any ordinary tyrant. The inflated are often mistaken for teachers. They speak in tones of authority, radiate charisma, and promise clarity to those wandering in confusion. But if you look closely, you will notice a rigid quality. There is no humility before the mysteries of life, no hesitation that marks the truly wise. Everything is explained, everything is judged, and disagreement is treated as resistance to goodness itself. Jung warned that this psychic inflation cannot be sustained. Sooner or later, the human vessel cracks beneath the weight of divine pretense. But before that collapse comes, others are often sacrificed to the altar of their certainty. Then there are those who vanish behind masks. Jung called this the danger of persona identification. To survive in society, each of us wears a face. We adapt, we smooth our edges, we learn what is acceptable. But when the mask becomes the only identity, when the human soul is lost beneath layers of performance, danger festers in silence. The persona-identified person may appear flawless, always appropriate, always polite, always measured. But this perfection is unnatural. It is the calm surface of a lake that conceals volcanic pressure beneath. Sooner or later, the repressed shadow erupts, and the eruption is all the more violent for having been suppressed so long. The danger here lies not in obvious cruelty, but in artificial perfection. Such people seem too smooth, too balanced, too correct, and yet their very presence feels hollow, as though something vital has been amputated. When the mask is threatened, even slightly, the reaction is disproportionate. A small criticism is felt as an attack on their very existence, and the explosion reveals the truth. The perfect mask has been hiding a chaos that knows no bounds. Most alarming of all, however, is archetypal possession. This is when a person ceases to be themselves at all, becoming instead the vessel of timeless energies too vast for an individual to contain. Their gaze hardens, their voice shifts, and suddenly you are no longer speaking with a human being, but with an impersonal force. They may embody the eternal victim, endlessly wounded and demanding rescue, or the righteous warrior, forever fighting cosmic enemies invisible to others, or the divine parent, controlling adults as though they were helpless children. To encounter such a person is to feel the weight of something ancient pressing through fragile flesh. The problem with archetypes is that they carry both light and shadow. The savior can heal, but also destroy. The warrior can protect, but also annihilate. When someone is possessed by these powers, they believe with absolute conviction that they are instruments of destiny. And because conviction persuades, others often follow. But every archetype eventually turns, and the possessed become fanatics, blind to the contradiction between what they claim to serve and what they actually enact. Jung saw saints become tyrants, lovers become tormentors, healers become destroyers, all under the spell of archetypal possession. Finally, Jung described the compulsion to repeat. Unlike the other dangers, it does not roar, it circles. These are the people who wander through life, replaying the same wounds again and again, enacting identical dramas with new actors. They are forever betrayed, forever abandoned, forever wronged, yet never aware that they are the architects of their own stage. To meet such a person is to risk being cast in a role you never agreed to play. The betrayer, the villain, the abandoner. Without realizing it, you may find yourself caught in a story that began long before you appeared, condemned to repeat scenes scripted by their unconscious. These compulsions are magnetic. They attract precisely the kind of people and circumstances that will recreate the old wound. Jung called it negative synchronicity, the way the unconscious orchestrates encounters to sustain its unfinished business. The danger is not only that they destroy themselves, but that they recruit others into their endless repetitions. Unless recognized, you too can be woven into their cycle of pain, trapped in a drama that belongs to their past, not your present. Protection, Jung believed, begins with awareness. If someone describes you in ways that feel alien to your true experience, trust yourself. If they interpret your every word as proof of their accusation, walk away. Do not waste your breath trying to correct the projector, for their certainty is immune to reason. Guard your boundaries, limit what you reveal, and keep record of events, because memory is easily rewritten in the distortion field of the unconscious. And when the warning signs gather too densely, the only path is withdrawal. To remain is to risk your sanity, for these storms do not pass quickly. They intensify until something breaks. But Jung's warning was not meant to inspire fear. His aim was liberation. He showed that these dangers, though terrifying, lose their grip the moment they are seen clearly. For the shadow thrives in darkness, but under the light of awareness, it loses its power. The inflated collapse when you refuse to kneel before them. The persona cracks when you look past the mask with unflinching eyes. Archetypal possession dissolves when you remember the humanity of the person beneath the force. And repetition compulsions weaken when you refuse to play the role assigned to you. The most dangerous people are not those who are evil in the conventional sense. They are those who remain unconscious of their own darkness. They wage wars they believe are holy. They wound while convinced they are healing. They destroy while certain they are protecting. But the moment you recognize these patterns, both in others and in yourself, you step outside their spell. You cease to be their mirror, their victim, their actor. You return to the ground of your own reality. Jung once said, "The most terrifying act is to accept oneself completely." Those who cannot bear this terror will always project their darkness outward, building false worlds to escape the truth within. And when you meet them, your task is not to correct them, nor to save them, but simply to remain conscious of what belongs to you and what does not. That awareness is the only shield against the most dangerous forces of human psychology.